It's just a small get-together, my dad said when I noticed I hadn't been invited to my brother's big engagement bash. So, I posted a selfie from the slopes. A few hours later, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Hi, Reddit. When I first heard from my dad that it was just a low-key reunion, I didn't question it. I figured it must be something informal. No need for a full invite list. But then I saw the photos online. There was my brother, grinning ear to ear next to his fiancée. The venue was lavish, decked out in lights and florals, packed with family and familiar faces. Everyone was there, except me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some casual catch-up. It was a major celebration, and I'd been deliberately left out. I sat there, staring at my phone in disbelief. A wave of emotions hit me. Hurt, confusion, then anger. My brother and I weren't best friends, but we got along fine. We hadn't fought. There was no fallout. Nothing that could explain why I was cut from such an important moment in his life. I kept thinking about it, my stomach twisting. I wanted to call my dad and demand a straight answer, but I already knew what I'd get. A dismissive excuse, maybe even the old, "you're overthinking it" line. So instead of sitting in silence and sulking, I did something else. I booked a spontaneous trip to a ski resort. Anywhere but here. Anywhere but stuck in my apartment feeling invisible while my family toasted without me. On the mountain, the cold wind on my face helped numb the ache a little. It felt freeing. Before heading back to my room, I snapped a selfie. Just me, bundled up in gear, snow-covered peaks behind me, and captioned it simply, "Hope everyone's enjoying their weekend as much as I am." I didn't think much of it. Maybe a few likes, some casual replies. But within hours, my phone was buzzing non-stop. First it was my dad, then my mom, then my brother. Then texts started pouring in from uncles, cousins, and relatives I hadn't heard from in months. At first, I ignored them, too stunned to deal with it. But then a message from my mom popped up. "We need to talk. Now." I hesitated before calling her back, nerves tangling in my chest. She picked up almost immediately, voice tight and frantic. "What are you doing? Why would you post that?" I blinked, thrown off. "What do you mean?" "I went on a trip." "What's the issue?" She let out a tense sigh. "It looks like we didn't invite you. People are asking questions." I laughed bitterly. "That's because you didn't." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, like she was scrambling for something to say. Finally, she muttered, "It wasn't intentional. We just thought, maybe you wouldn't want to come." My stomach sank. "Why would you think that?" Silence. "Your brother thought it would be easier this way. He didn't want any drama." My fists tightened at my sides. "What drama? I didn't even know there was an issue." She let out another heavy sigh. "Can we talk about this later? Just take the post down, okay? People are starting to ask questions." And that's when it clicked. They weren't concerned about how I felt. Not about the pain, the exclusion, the betrayal. No, they were only concerned about optics, about damage control, about people finding out. That realization lit something inside me. "No, Mom, I'm not deleting it." I ended the call before she could reply. A few moments later, my brother's name lit up my screen. I considered ignoring it, but I needed answers. I answered, my tone sharp. "Why wasn't I invited?" He hesitated. "It's complicated." Then uncomplicate it. Silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. "Sarah didn't want you there." His fiancée. The woman I'd barely interacted with. It felt like a punch to the chest. "What? Why? What did I ever do to her?" Another pause. "She thinks you're unpredictable. You speak your mind too much." She didn't want to risk any tension. I sat there stunned. "So, because I don't fake niceties and keep quiet, I get erased from your engagement? It's not like that." We just wanted the night to go smoothly. I gave a cold, bitter laugh. Well, you got what you wanted. I wasn't there. Congrats. And I ended the call before he could explain further. I sat motionless for a while, staring at my phone, scrolling through the flood of texts from my family, all of them begging me to fix it, to somehow make this mess disappear. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. They made a decision, and now they were scrambling to cover it up. I wasn't sure what my next move would be. But one thing I knew for certain, I wouldn't stay silent. This wasn't going to be swept aside like everything else. My fingers hovered over my phone's screen as I considered how to respond. My whole life, I'd been the odd one out. Not because I was cruel or reckless, but because I refused to play along. I spoke honestly, didn't pretend, and never wore masks to make others comfortable. And for that, I'd been labeled too much. Now, that label had cost me a place at my brother's engagement party. But what hurt the most wasn't Sarah's judgment. It was the silence from everyone else. Not one person had defended me. Not my parents. Not the cousins I grew up with. Not even a single, "Why isn't she here?" They let it happen, willingly. And now, because I dared to post one photo, one tiny reminder that I existed, they were falling apart. I inhaled slowly, then started typing. Since it seems a lot of people suddenly care, let me make things clear. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't too busy. I wasn't above it all. I simply wasn't invited. And instead of owning that, my family wants me to stay quiet, so they can keep pretending everything's fine. I hit post. The fallout was instant. My inbox exploded. Some messages were from distant relatives who had no clue I'd been excluded, and they were outraged. Others came from old friends, offering kindness and support. Then the angry ones started rolling in. Texts from my parents, my brother, a couple of cousins, accusing me of being vindictive, attention-seeking, and trying to ruin what was supposed to be a joyful occasion. But it was my dad's message that stood out. "This is a mistake. Take the post down. Let's talk about this privately." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Privately. That word again. It was always the preferred method. Keep it quiet. Brush it under the rug. Talk it out behind closed doors where they could rewrite the narrative, gaslight me into silence, and move on like nothing had happened. Not this time. Instead of responding, I placed my phone on the nightstand and stepped outside into the crisp, snowy air. I walked aimlessly for a while, letting the cold sting my cheeks as my thoughts churned with every step. By the time I returned, the post had blown up. Some of my cousins had commented directly, expressing shock, confusion. One wrote, "Wait, you weren't invited? I thought you just couldn't make it." Another went even further, tagging my parents. "Why didn't you invite them? Seriously, what's going on?" That's when my mom called again. This time, I picked up. Her voice trembled, as if she'd been crying. "Why are you doing this? We're your family." I took a breath, steady and clear. "Really? Because I didn't feel like family when you all left me out." She scrambled for words. "It wasn't really our call. Sarah," I cut her off. "Sarah isn't family yet. You are, and you still chose her over me." Silence. "You're only upset now because people found out. Be honest. If I hadn't said anything, if I hadn't posted that photo, would you have even called? Would you have even cared?" Still no answer. Just a quiet exhale on the other end. Finally, she asked, voice weary, "What do you want from us?" There were so many things I could have said. I wanted them to own what they'd done, to acknowledge the hurt, to apologize genuinely, for my brother to regret excluding me, to understand this wasn't just about one party. It was about years of being treated like a background character in my own family. But all I said was, Nothing. I just wanted people to know the truth. And then I ended the call. That was the last conversation I had with them for a long time. In the following weeks, my brother reached out a few times, but I didn't reply. Through mutual friends, I heard the engagement party had become a family scandal. People were asking questions. Some were uncomfortable. Some were angry. Sarah, apparently, was livid that my post had stirred so much backlash. But honestly, I felt nothing. For the first time, I hadn't stayed quiet. I hadn't let them sweep it under the rug. I'd stood up for myself, for my truth, and I'd forced them to confront it, whether they liked it or not. Yes, it hurt. It hurt more than I could admit. But it also set me free. I focused on myself after that. I traveled, built new friendships, spent time with people who actually saw me, who valued me without conditions. As for my family, they had to live with what they'd done. No more rewrites. No more pretend. A year later, my brother got married. I wasn't invited, and this time, I didn't flinch.